Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hello to all my homies. Welcome back to another episode of the Work From Home Show. I'm your host, Naresh Vissa, along with Adam. Adam, how you doing?
Oh, it's a good day at the house.
Good day at the house. I think all of us are at the house, and that's why we're doing this podcast. That's why you listeners are listening and tuning into us. And just want to say thank you to all the homies who are at home, homeboys, homegirls, even, is home trans a thing? I mean, we welcome everybody.
No discrimination here, as long as you can make money from the house, man.
Absolutely. We welcome anyone and everyone. So on today's episode, we want to talk about how to transition from your desk office to your home office. And that's a transition that I had to make, going from the desk we talked earlier, really going from the desk working with you, Adam, to the dorm room, to back to corporate desks for a few years, and then officially to my apartment desk and now my home. Well, it went from an apartment desk to a condo desk to a beach desk. That was pretty cool. And now I'm at a home office. How about you, Adam? What was your transition like? Was it as many as mine?
No, mine was pretty simple. Mine was from the corporate desk. Well, I take that back. My first office that I had was underground. It was literally at the University of Texas in the communications building.
Oh, okay.
My floor was below ground. So I went from below ground to ground floor to 16th floor to I never had a couch. I never did a couch job because by the time I started working from home, I had a space in the house. I had a little office area that I could use. I think it was probably the formal dining room initially, or right off the formal dining room. So, I had myself a desk, and then we moved to Austin and bought a house, and I have my own office here. And I definitely could never have had a beach office because I'd just be a lobster and walk around with sunburns all day.
Yeah, well, I had been working from home officially working from home for about 2 years before I moved down to Tampa from Baltimore. Baltimore is where I got my company, Christian Media and Marketing, started. And I moved to the beach. It had Wi-Fi. And surprisingly, Adam, I lived there for 4 years. And I can count on one hand how many times I actually took my work down with me and just chilled out on the beach. Most of the times were when people were visiting and they thought it was really cool. But anyway, we want to talk today about that transition because it is a transition. I would say it's a pretty big transition. And many of you listening are going through that transition right now where you've gotten so used to working in an office or a desk, having a boss look over your shoulder. And now all of a sudden you're at home and you find yourself with all this time and you don't know what to do with it. So we want to go over that, kind of share our own personal experiences with the transition, especially because Adam and I, we've had different transitions doing this. We were at different stages in our lives. And so hopefully we'll cover it all. So Adam, how about you tell us a little bit about your transition? You talked about how you worked at Biz Radio and then you kind of made that transition while your wife was pregnant and then you had your first son. Tell us about that transition.
Yeah, so we had, I had the desk in the office. Like I said, it was always I always had an office mate whenever I was, I mostly always had an office mate whenever I was at Biz Radio. We would have interns like you, and we'd have 3 people in the office. Eventually, we laid off enough people that I got my own office. And
you probably got 2 offices to yourself.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. And so it got to the point where, I had my own office there. And then I got laid off and went to the house, and I just had a little desk there, but it was a little, well, it was kind of it wasn't as big a transition for me initially because I was high up enough in the company that I didn't really have, the only boss that I had was kind of the CEO for the most part, especially because the higher ups had been let go. So I really only had the CEO over me, and he wasn't really micromanaging me because he knew that I did my job, and he never, he saw the results.
Mm-hmm, I remember. He really respected you.
Yeah, so in that regard, I had my own office, but if I wanted to, I could just shut the door and people would leave me alone the whole day. So by the time I went and worked from home, the biggest thing, it was nice. I mean, it was great because one of the biggest complaints I had and one of the hardest things about working in the office was, it was hard to eat healthy. I mean, it was people would always bring something in, the bosses would be buying food, and so it was kind of nice that I was able to get out of there and kind of get rid of that distraction. And then I just had my desk in the room, and I was used to being alone. I mean, it had gotten to the point where there were so few people there that I was used to being alone. And, my wife would be home at 4:00 and we'd hang out then. But during the day, I'd just kind of spend an hour here, an hour there working or, cleaning up around the house or whatever. And so it wasn't too terrible for me. What about you?
Well, you bring up a good point before you get to me. You bring up a good point on the food, because that's something now all of you homies are going to have to. You're basically going to have to cook for yourself, or you could order. I don't know about ordering Uber Eats or DoorDash. I mean, that could be a little risky because I just got an email from DoorDash and Uber Eats both. I've gotten an email from like every company over the weekend. And they all say pretty much the same thing. But anyway, that was a transition for me, the food, because I went from eating out every day, fast food, to eating at home, which was a little bit healthier. I wasn't the healthiest person, but it was still healthier than eating out. But that's something obviously that now you have to take into consideration for at least breakfast and lunch. And these are kind of the little things that you don't think about making that transition from desk to home, cleaning up around the house, having a spouse. In your case, you were already married at that time, and having a spouse who does leave the house every day to go to work, and now you're alone at home, thinking about how that's going to be. For me, my transition was, I was at a different stage in my life. I was in my mid-20s. I was single. I lived alone. So I wasn't married. I didn't have a girlfriend. It was just me. I didn't have any roommates. It was me in this one-bedroom condo in Midtown Baltimore. And it was a big transition because I didn't really have that many friends in the area. Like, my work was my life. So when I transitioned to the home, I didn't know what to do with myself. It got boring. And I remember, like, I was even talking to myself because I had no one else to talk to. Like, that's
good
how
idea, Naresh. Yeah, beautiful. I wish I'd thought of that.
Like, I'm serious. Like, there was no one around. Like, I didn't know anybody. I didn't have that many friends. I'm not from Baltimore. So it was a big transition, but within 2 weeks, I kind of figured it out. And I went from talking to myself to listening to podcasts and hearing other people talk. So that was really educational. And to cure the boredom, I made a schedule. Like, I ended up just loving and getting so used to the schedule that I created. It was, waking up, getting ready, taking a shower, eating breakfast, doing my work, making lunch for myself, doing work again, watching a movie. I had on demand. I still do, on demand TV. So I'd watch whatever was on demand or on Netflix. I think that year, 2013, I must have watched at least 200 movies. And so some days I watched like 3 movies, not just one. And then on top of that, I started writing. So I started writing my first book, Podcastnomics, which ended up becoming a #1 bestseller. It's really the reason why we have this podcast to begin with. And I've written 4 more books since then. So that became a part of my routine, writing almost every day, like spending a solid 1 hour just writing, praying. I mean, I kind of became spiritual and religious, so I spent some time doing that. Reading. You can't really write much without reading. And I started reading I mean, it was pretty crazy. It was like a book every 2 weeks. I think I legitimately read like 20 books in 2013 and 2014. Um, I mean, now I just don't even have much time to read. Now I'll be lucky to read 5 books in a year. But I read a lot of books on my Kindle, on my iPad, paperback, hardback. And so that's how I made the transition. And people listening might be wondering, well, you haven't really talked about work. Like, aren't you supposed to transition working? And we talked about this on a previous episode, Adam, or on another episode, Adam, where the amount of time when you're at home, you'll become way more efficient, because when you work, you're actually doing work that needs to be done, versus when you're in an office working, you're only working for maybe 2 hours out of the 8 or 9 hours that you're in the office.
But you got to look busy the other times.
Oh yeah, that's one of the important things that I was not very good at in the corporate world. I was not good at looking busy, but some people are really good at that. They make careers out of it. And so really the point I want to make is there's a huge difference between our transitions, Adam, and maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. But the difference is you were at a different stage of your life, and I was at a different stage of my life. And I know that listeners listening, many of them are already going to have families with kids, and they're being forced to work from home. And that's completely different. If you've got 4 kids, Adam, and all of a sudden, if a husband and wife who aren't used to working from home are now forced to work from home with 4 kids, I mean, how do they handle that?
So one thing I will say is you're going to need to have a talk with your spouse or significant other, because they need to understand, if you're staying home, that you are working, because, it can easily slip into, well, why didn't you do this today? You were at home all day. Well, yes, you were at home all day, but you were supposed to, you had stuff you actually had to do. You had work you had to do. You had this or that you had to do. And so they need to realize you're not just a stay-at-home parent or stay-at-home person. And that's something that has been at times a little bit of a challenge for my wife and I, is that, it's like, well, you're at home all day. Why isn't this cleaned up? Because I don't clean up that much. I'm terrible at it. Whenever I lived alone, my place was a pigsty. It would be stuff everywhere, and I've been working on it my whole life, but I'm not that great at it, I'll be honest, and it's probably not going to really change. And so, we had this discussion, we've had it before. It's like, how much can you do? And I always think I can do more than I can in a day, because I think, I can get this done, this done, this done, this done, and then things just end up taking a little bit longer and a little bit longer and a little bit longer. But it's going to be important for everybody to kind of spell out with your spouse and say, you know what, I found, say the first week, I'm only going to work. Like, I'm not going to, I'm going to do the, after 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever, I'll do what I usually did when I get home. But from the time that I usually leave for work until the time that I usually get home, let me just do my thing for a week and see how much time it's going to take me. And maybe that takes me 2 hours, maybe that takes me 5 hours, maybe it takes me 6 hours. But then you can go back to your spouse or significant other and be like, hey, I've got 2, 3, 4, 5 hours during the day where I can legitimately do something else. During those 2 or 3 hours, I want to work out for 45 minutes. I want to watch a TV show for 30 minutes. I want to do this. I'll have an hour, hour and a half a day, whatever it is, to clean this or to do this task for you. And so really I wasn't good when I first started at actually setting a schedule. I worked when I felt like it. I didn't when I didn't. And so that was probably not the healthiest thing for me to do. Now I have a very set work schedule. I work before the kids wake up. I work during their rest, because even though my kid is almost going on 10, we homeschool, and so he has rest time so that I can get stuff done. And then I work after they go to bed. Those are my work hours. So in any given day, I could work up to 5 hours. Do I work 5 hours every day? Absolutely not. I don't. But, I have my 5 hours a day that I could work if I needed to. And my wife is kind enough to understand that, there are going to be some nights where I don't see her. I'm in my office, I'm doing work. we don't hang out, but we have a designated night, every week. Every week it's Friday nights after the kids are in bed. I don't work. We hang out, and no matter what's happened the rest of the week, that's our night for like our indoor date night.
Really, really good points that you bring up, especially when it comes to relationships, because those listening, you might have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you might be engaged or married. And in my case, I kind of noticed how even our relationship changed when we were dating. We obviously lived separately, and so my girlfriend, now my wife, but my girlfriend would get the best version of me, because I'd be at my house all day working, doing my thing. And by the time she'd see me, I would give her 100% attention, because I was done with everything that I needed to do. And so she got that version of me. And then when I moved in after we got engaged, I think it was a transition for her, because I was actually working. I guess she thought I just didn't work, that I just hung out and gave her 100% all the time. And so she saw me actually working and being in my room and, being in there for hours sometimes, or working late into the night. And that was kind of a wake up call. And then now, being married and having a kid, it's obviously really, really different, because we have another person to take care of. And so it's really all about time management and focusing when we are working. My wife works at the hospital, so when she's there, she's obviously working really hard. And when she comes home, once in a while, she's on call. I don't know if your wife is on call.
No, she's specifically taking jobs where she doesn't have to do call.
Okay, yeah. So things obviously change. And I don't know, maybe you can say with 1 kid versus 2 kids versus 3 kids versus 4 kids.
Well, I can't say 3 versus 4 since we have twins. But no, I definitely think for people who have newborns like you talked about listening to podcasts or watching movies or reading books. I found, I don't know what you do for like nap times, but I would rock my kids to sleep every time. And so what I would do is I would take my phone in if I wanted to watch a TV show, and I'd watch a show while I was rocking him to sleep. Or I would take my Kindle in and I would read my Kindle. I tell you what, you talked about reading 20 books in a year. I like to read like science fiction type books that are 250 to 350 pages. My first year that the twins were born, I read 50 books in the year. That's how much time I spent in the rocking chair with the kids. I read 50 books. So I mean, you can utilize some time that you wouldn't really think about to do that. I mean, what else are you going to do while you're if your wife isn't there, or if you exclusively bottle feed or formula feed or whatever? While you're doing that, there are other things you can be doing that it doesn't take much concentration to watch a TV show, on your phone with headphones in while you're doing it.
Yeah, and this is also a really good time to really work on yourself, because like everything's shut down. The restaurants are shut down, the movie theaters are shut down. So you're going to have to get used to enjoying being at home. Like I said, both of our wives work in healthcare, so they still have to go to work. They still have to go to the hospital or the clinic or whatever. But most activities are canceled. There's just, you're going to have to figure it out and find ways that entertain you being at home. And whether that's Netflix, look, you're going to end up getting bored of Netflix eventually. But whether that's catching up on the shows or finding those books or finally being able to pursue those passions that you've always been wanting to pursue, or writing that book that you've always wanted to write, or starting that music career that you've always wanted to record, you're going to have to find that, because I guarantee you're going to realize when you wake up tomorrow morning, or maybe you've already realized, like, holy smokes, like I waste a lot of time at the office and I need to figure out what to do with my time.
Yeah, I've found that I have a dual monitor setup at the house. And sometimes I realize that I just need to, I'll be doing something on one screen and it's very tempting to like pull up a TV show on the other one. So there's sometimes when I really need to work, I just turn off the second monitor and do it that way, just so I'm not even tempted to look. And I'll say that I've found that the extra time I've had, I've, done something that I could fail at. I mean, I've started 1 or 2 businesses that I've thought might work, and they didn't. I'll be honest. I tried to to do something and I failed at it. But if I hadn't have been working from home and I hadn't had the time, maybe I wouldn't have tried it. So it's try something that scares you, or try something that you don't know that you're going to succeed at, because you've got free time. You may as well go for it, and you're never going to have a better time than right now, especially if you know that your employer's not going to let you stay home full time after this scare is over. Now's the time, and especially if it's something you can do that makes you money, and you can say, hey boss, I want to cut back to 4 days a week because I don't need this money, then all the better for you.
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. So any other questions you have or anything else that you want to talk about that you think would be valuable to our listeners?
There's one little thing. I think it's just important that you take the time and realize that it's okay if you're not working just to have fun. I mean, if you've got kids, take the time and play with them. Because when you go back to the office, it's going to be back to the same routine as you had before. And if you haven't had time during the day, especially if your kids have been at school forever or, a couple of years, they're not going to be home for you to have fun with during the day, even if you end up staying home, working from home, because they're going to have to go back to school. Eventually schools are going to reopen. So, if they ask you to do something, just say, you know what, 30 minutes, I can go play a board game with you, or I can do this with you. Take advantage of the time.
I actually have a question for you, Adam, and I know you homeschool your kids, but I think you still might be qualified to answer this. It's not just parents who are making the transition to home. Now, all of a sudden, parents have to take care of their kids for multiple weeks. This is not just a 1 week spring break. How do the kids make the transition being at home? That's
easier than people want to make it believe. I've been seeing on my Facebook feed all these people being like, what am I going to do with my kids? What am I going to do with that? Let me tell you, since my kids were around 2, they've been not fending for themselves, but I've given them the space to do what they want. Like our kids this morning, our 9.5, 7.5, 5-year-olds, they didn't come into our room to wake my wife and I up until 9:30, because they know when they wake up, they can do whatever they want. They can play. They can make their own breakfast if they're old enough, or can convince their older brother to do it. But kids, if you just give them time and space, they'll amaze you at what they can do and how little they really need you to be around and to guide them in what they want to do. Because kids are naturally curious, naturally want to do things. So don't schedule stuff for them so much. I mean, I would say if my kids were going to public school and weren't having to go there, don't worry about academics. The school's not going to let them fail. Your kids aren't going to become magically dumb in the 2 or 3 weeks that they're at home. Just enjoy it. Let your kid, or what? If your kid gets bored, so what? Kids need to learn how to be bored. I mean, let's be honest, if they go to a job where they're working in an office full time, they're going to be bored. You're going to get bored eventually. They need to learn to deal with it. So I would say just relax. Let your kid be bored, play with your kid when you can, but let them try to figure out what it's like to kind of be on their own a little bit. So that's my 2 cents. And you should let your kid just hang out by himself too, Naresh.
Well, he's been at home since the day he was born, literally.
He's 2 months old. It's time to start fending for himself,
Yeah, well, going back to the kids, I think the same principles apply, though, because it's a time to really work on the skills and the strengths and weaknesses for the kids. So, now you have more time. You don't have to wait until summer school to go to math camp or learn Spanish. Might as well try to do it now. And that way, if you have time as a parent, it'll keep yourself busy as well. Spend some quality time with your kids. Teenagers, I don't think they've got minds of their own. I don't think you can really do much as a parent I don't think you need to worry as much as long as your kid's staying out of trouble.
Yeah, and definitely also, since they know they're going to be going back to school soon, they don't get into the summer mindset. You can find time to kind of, and especially since they don't have sports, you don't have anything to do on the weekends, you can find the thing that your kid enjoys doing and encourage it. Like my 7-year-old loves origami. Absolutely loves it. He does it all the time. We've subscribed to one. We've paid. People used to have a YouTube channel, then they made their own app, and so we paid for that. But your kids have things they're interested in, and it's not like summer where they just, kind of check out. So find the thing your kids like to do and, encourage it, especially if it can then kill time for you. If you can get your kid, let's say I only had my 7-year-old. If he was into origami and I found this origami YouTube channel and then he was doing origami by himself, that buys me an hour of work that I could do, or an hour of time that I could read. It'll give you free time and your kid time to do things they enjoy.
Awesome. Well, I think that was another great episode of the Work From Home Show, Adam. Thanks for, again, being an awesome co-host. For those listening, go to our website, www.workfromhomeshow.com. Get your free copy of my book, 50 Shades of Marketing: Whip Your Business into Shape and Dominate Your Competition. A lot of good tools and strategies to help you take your business or even your job to the next level, working from home. And please, we're now at we're now a few episodes in, and we've gone from 1 to 2 to 5 listeners. So to our 5 listeners, go to iTunes, go to TuneIn, Stitcher. We're going to be available everywhere within the next couple of days. But go to Apple Podcasts and leave us a nice review. We would greatly appreciate that. And as always, if you have any questions or comments about what we've discussed, email us, hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. We'll see you guys on the next episode.